Welcome to yet another episode of Two Up Front. My name is Jay, and I am joined by Chuck. What's up, Chuck?
What's up, Jay? What's up to everyone, listeners, subscribers? Let's get into it, Jay. So, bumper game of the weekend. It was City against Chelsea. I think it was a humdinger. It was very interesting. And it had title implications because if Chelsea win, then they're closer and can somewhat mount a challenge from wherever they are, from third. But that didn't happen. And now, as a result, they are a whole 13 points behind, 1-3 in position number 3. Does that, for you, Jay, never mind the title race, does that show the actual gap between the two teams in terms of quality, in terms of how far each team has come in terms of progress?
I think right now you have to say yes, particularly because when you look at Manchester City, they are on one of those runs. They are on those runs where no one else can match them. 11 games, 12 games winning streak, and it's not just Chelsea. The gap is not just to Chelsea, the gap is to everyone. And they are a squad where they don't really have any needs. They don't have a striker. We know that. We've covered that they tried to go after Kane, they tried to go after Ronaldo, didn't get any of these guys, but they are still humming. And then when you look at Chelsea coming into the season, yes, you were like, okay, European champions, they've got everything. The only thing that they're missing is the striker up front because Werner was not quite doing the business for which he was bought. And then they had the other German up front as well, but he also was not scoring the goals. They brought in Lukaku, but still in this game, they are still lacking people. They're lacking bodies. James is not there. Chilwell is not there. And we know that they need their fullbacks in terms of what they're trying to do and the way that Tuchel wants to play, particularly in attack, because they're there to provide the assists. Also, we saw with James, he went on a run where he was scoring the goals himself. And up to a point, their defense was carrying their goal-scoring threat. So when you look at them and you look how they are built and you look at how the number of things that they're missing in terms of players, in terms of how the players fit into the system, I think it's fair to say that Manchester City are that much a class above Chelsea.
I think I concur. I completely agree because as much as 13 points is a big gap, if you look at the fact that because they're down and without James, without Chilwell, they look a completely different side. And as much as every team, more or less, if you look in terms of the other 19, that's why Liverpool is sweating Mane and Salah and Keita going to the AFCON. Everyone has a couple of players on which they've put their hopes on, or rather are a big part player for their team, except for City. City are the team who can rest Diaz if they need to. They can rest Laporte, they can play Stones, they can play Ake, they can play Zinchenko. Whereas with Chelsea, if you take away James, if you take away Chilwell, all of a sudden they're a different animal. And that shows in their gameplay because Chelsea had, I think, about 50%, if not more, of their goals came from those two positions, from the wing backs. And as soon as you take off those wing backs from the team, that's minus the goals, minus the attacking threat, and so they're a different animal altogether. I mean,
now all they have is the LeBron James of soccer,
who's
not quite doing it.
Yeah, he has to wear the American flag for him to do that. But the difference, Jay, with the two sides, Grealish and Foden go to an outing or whatever during Christmas. And Pep says, now you guys are not, your head's not in the game, you guys can sit out a few games. Like 2 or 3 games, they were set out. Lukaku had those comments, and at best, they could only afford to sit him out for one game because they needed him back. We need those assets. I mean, imagine being able to sit out £100 million players like, dude, your attitude's not right. We don't need for you to play. Foden, one of the prodigies in terms of English football, you can sit out and they can still accumulate points. So in terms of the gaps, in terms of resources and where they are, I think 13 points is a clear picture of where each team is. So
it really is. You know, particularly when I was looking at City, we have discussed the fact that Kevin De Bruyne has not been himself. He's not been himself, and he's also been out. And Kevin De Bruyne, who is, we can agree, City's best player and maybe the player of the Etihad era, as well as the best player in the league. And he's out for a number of games and they don't miss him. That it honestly feels like there's a juggernaut over there at the Etihad, and they're just unfair at this point. They're just unfair at this point. And he comes back into the team, Kevin De Bruyne that is, and in this game he looked like the best player in the league, because not just with the goal was scrumptious. I mean, he rides a tackle from N'Golo Kante, who himself did not have the best of games, but you saw De Bruyne in the first half as well. The positions that he was getting into, he was wide on the left, and you have him playing up to the level where I think when he's at his best, you see him receiving the ball, and you have a defender who's putting him under pressure, and he slows down the ball, and he just accelerates past a defender, and they are left in his dust. And when you saw with the goal as well, as I'm saying, with the goal was brilliant. It's things that we have seen from him before. But with that being said, you think to yourself that they could have done it without him still, because they've done so much in his absence. As I'm saying, they've done so much without, very obviously, a central striker. So it's a team without any needs. And I mean, it's not just the gap between them and Chelsea, it's also the gap between them and Liverpool. As much as Liverpool did win 3-0 over the weekend, they were very obviously missing Mo Salah, very obviously missing Mane, missing the pace, missing the goals, missing the creation. And there isn't next man up at Liverpool where you can just bring a guy off of the bench and he can replicate what the frontline guys are doing. Whereas at Manchester City, oh, we don't have Gundogan, oh, that's fine. Oh, we don't have Rodri, oh, that's fine. Oh, we don't have De Bruyne, that's fine. So you're looking at the team, you're thinking to yourself, what are their weaknesses? Because even just outside of player personnel, when you are actually playing against them, they don't have the strongest back line. But I don't think actually in this era of the game, you don't have 2005, 2006 Chelsea. You don't have Vidic and Ferdinand. You know, you've got all these players and they're fairly good, but they're not dominant back lines that we're seeing. But City don't concede in spite of that, because they've got so much of the ball, and when you recover the ball from them, they are recovering so quickly to fall behind the attack and to win the ball back. So, man, it's hard to see how you bridge that gap. Hard to see how you get close to them, because also I think to myself that Pep is on somewhat of a revenge tour, because before Oli was out and there was that chat that Oli has figured out Pep's Manchester City, then he goes to Old Trafford and he pummels United. Same thing coming into the season, that Tuchel has Pep's number, having beaten them 3 times last season, and it's like, okay, watch this.
I think with Chelsea and Liverpool, it's a matter of how good is your plan B. Whereas I think Man City have gone so far ahead of the curve that their plan B is effectively their plan A. Because if you look at the squad depth, we're still, when you talk about Chelsea and Liverpool, we're talking about who can they sign, who do they need. Whereas with City, and it was an arguable matter, do they need a striker? Because they've scored so many goals without a striker, and they've proven that they don't really need a striker. Whereas with Liverpool, all of a sudden, if Sadio Mane and Salah are out, it's like, what do we do? How good are the backups? With Chelsea, if James and Chilwell are out, how good are the backups? Where with City, you've never asked that question, because Kevin De Bruyne has been out injured. He's been out with COVID. It didn't matter. Walker was also out for disciplinary reasons. Comes back into the team. It doesn't matter. They're all in a seamless transition. So in terms of a total football identity, I think they've adapted quite well. And now, speaking of adapting, Jay, you and I had a conversation prior, and
a disagreement.
Yeah, a disagreement is probably fair in terms of adaptability. And primarily what we saw with Lukaku is that he was playing a holding role in terms of up top, target man. The ball was there. He was a reference point. Knock the ball down, keep the ball, and play other people and put them in the game. You say that does not suit his game at all, because according to you, what other stats say, and what we've seen, that at Inter he was not playing this kind of football, and that's where he shone. That's where he got the goals. That's where him and Lautaro Martinez had a blast. My question is this: who should adapt to who? Should Tuchel build his team around Lukaku so that they feed into his strengths, or should Lukaku finally learn how to be a target man and help his Chelsea team?
It should be Chelsea adapting to Lukaku, and Lukaku said as much. In that explosive interview of his, he criticized the coach and he criticized the system. And basically what he said in the interview, what he was getting across to all of us, is that he doesn't want to play this way. He doesn't want to play the way that he's being deployed at Chelsea, because what happened at Inter Milan is that he answered some questions on Twitter as well, where he said that his back to goal game has improved under Conte. But the reason he was even in a position to say that is because prior to that, it was horrendous. And the thing with Lukaku, because of the way that he's built, he is miscast as the classic number 9, where he's this figure where you're just going to plant him in front and you're just going to knock the ball into him. He's going to control the ball, bring everyone into play. The issue, though, is I don't believe he's got the skill set to do that. And particularly... And he's been derided for this throughout his career, that his first touch is just not good enough. And when you are playing the way that he's being asked to play, you have to be good in tight positions. And he's just not good in tight positions. Conte recognized that. And Conte adapted the game that Inter played, and he adapted Lukaku's game. What he asked of him is do the things that you are best at. And we saw a glimpse of that in the game against Manchester City, and we saw quite a big offering of that when he was at Inter Milan, where they don't necessarily feed it into feet where you have to absolutely get your first touch on point. You make the argument that if you are a footballer, you have to have a great first touch. And that is true most of the time, but it doesn't have to be great. It just needs to be good enough where you can get to the second movement. And with Lukaku at Inter Milan, they were knocking it into him, and even if he miscontrols it where it goes 50 centimeters or a meter ahead of him, he can recover and then he can drive at the defense. He did that in a phase against Manchester City, which ended with him not giving the pass to Alonso, and he gave it to, forgot who was coming from the right, but he gave the pass to the right and the guy happened to be offside. But in that sequence, you could clearly see this is what he thrives in, this is what he's good at. Therefore, if you are the Chelsea coach, then you need to say, okay, we're not going to ask you to be Didier Drogba, because you're not Didier Drogba. Be Lukaku. And if you ask him to be Lukaku, he's the guy who gives you 30 goals in the season. So it's very clear to me that's why you signed him as well, because of what he was doing at Inter Milan. And if that's why you signed him, then ask him to do the job that gave him that much success in Italy.
And to which I disagreed and said, Uguti, against teams like Manchester City, you need to be able to do a job. Against Norwich, Burnley, Watford, play the Lukaku way. However you played at Inter and however you prefer to play, the team will be there to support you. But against City, you need to do a job. I believe
he can't do the job.
I believe he needs to learn. He needs to learn the job.
Doesn't have the skill set to do the job.
And here's why. Number one, I don't think that Tuchel just figured out, you know what, on a Saturday morning, Lukaku play here. I believe that Lukaku has been playing as a target man in practice, and he has to have proven that I can do this for Tuchel to deploy him in a big game like this, because this is potentially, the league has somewhat been gone for a while, a title swinger that if we win, we are closer. If we lose, it's almost curtains for us. I believe he must have done some work in training in terms of being able to be a target man, number one. Number two, first touch is important in football in every position, because one, we give it to you as a keeper, you miscontrol the attackers in, you probably concede a goal there. Two, I can give you a clear example of how Fred was always targeted. I forgot which team now, and they were saying that we target Fred because his first touch is poor, and so they put pressure on Fred whenever he got the ball. If you cannot get your first touch right, never mind in the imagination.
And has Fred figured out his first touch?
Not quite, and that's why United's midfield is... for all the work that Fred does, he loses the ball so many times because his first touch forces him to play the ball at a last-ditch attempt. He's forced to play in a particular because the ball has run away from him. So here's what I'm saying, Jay. If Lukaku wants to play the way he wants to play, cool. But in high leverage situations, Jay, when it's a big game like this, do the job for us, because I do believe that Pep has adjusted. You guys played against us no Werner. You were using pace down the wings. You guys have done all these things. Now we have closed that door. That's why I'm playing Laporte instead of Wood Addings. That's why I'm playing Stones. That's why I've got the players that I've played in. That's why I've got Walker, because no one was beating Walker. No one for the ball at any point in the game. But when he was supposed to use his strengths, for me, and this is not only the first touch, but a football idea, his passes were bad, Jay. Never mind. Let's just say he did have a bad game. His passes were bad in terms of who to pass and how much weight to put on the actual pass. So for me, I'm saying Lukaku can be Lukaku on any other day, but you need to do a job for the team. You were saying to me at some point that he's 29 this year, and there's not much he can learn at this point in time. Thierry Henry came from Juve as a midfielder, right? As a winger.
But he was also a goal scorer.
As a goal scorer. Wenger converted him into a striker, and that's what he became. And he became the king at Arsenal. He
didn't become a number 9 though. And this is why when you look back at Thierry's career, you know that his trademark finish was coming from the wing, because So Wenger adapted. He didn't ask him to be Ian Wright.
Yeah, fine. He didn't become Ian Wright, but what I'm saying is it's a different role. He adapted some part of his game. right? And having given all that he's given to Arsenal, when he goes to Barcelona, he says that Pep taught me how to play football, meaning even at that ripe age when he's gone to Barcelona, he's learned something new. He's added something to his game.
He can say that, but then he didn't look like a new player at Barcelona. In fact, he was his worst version in Europe when he was at Barcelona.
That's because they're trying to squeeze all three between Messi, Zlatan and Thierry Henry. Maybe it was hard to do that.
And even if you say that, that's Thierry Henry. There are other guys who are just that much better at football. There are football geniuses. Lukaku, the thing that you're asking Lukaku, when you say that, well, we need you to do a job against Manchester City, he doesn't have the skill set. You're not going to beat it into him that, well, we need you to do this, so you're supposed to figure it out on match day. And even if you say that, well, you might suppose that in training he has shown an ability to do the thing that they're asking of him. I don't necessarily think so, because as we've just covered, Chelsea are highly dependent on their fullbacks. So what you want to do is you want to have those fullbacks overlap, and you want to have them put the ball into the box. With Werner, yeah, you're probably going to put it like on his feet. Same thing with Lukaku most of the time. But then you're also going to ask him to head the ball. And when they're under pressure against a Manchester City, they want to hit the ball long, and they want to ask of Lukaku to suddenly figure out something that he has never been good at. So in what 27 in his 27 years and however many years he's been playing football, he's never shown a propensity to be a guy where you can knock it into him and he's going to give you what you were asking him to do against Manchester City. And then when he goes to Inter Milan, they don't ask that of him at all. The coach, who looks at his talent and recognizes what he has to work with, is like, okay, these are your shortcomings. We're not going to ask you to do much of that. Put that to the side. Let's look at what you can do and let's double down on that. And he got success with that, which is what earned him the transfer fee that eventually they bought him for. And when he's there for big money, I don't think then you suddenly ask him to do something that he wasn't doing before.
Fair point, but as I'm saying, you need to do a job. Your career, 32 games out of the entire season, play the way you need to play. But for these 6 games against Liverpool, against Man City, against the other teams, maybe it's a United, maybe it's an Arsenal, give us a job. Because Kevin De Bruyne is not a 9, but Kevin De Bruyne plays as a false 9 because the team requires him to play as a false 9. Sometimes they played Foden there. They're not shining in those spots, but they're doing a job for the team. So all I'm saying is that for 90 minutes,
I kind of want to say it looks like they are, because the entire team is just good. They can compensate for that. Whereas with Lukaku, you have a need for him to do the thing that he can't do, and it's glaring. Therefore, when he doesn't do it, that why don't you do this for us? Because we absolutely need you to do it for us and to do it at this level. I just don't think they're going to be successful continuously asking him to do something that he can't do.
I just believe when he was holding off his man very well. He was getting into dangerous positions very well. If his touch, which is a football skill, not a striker skill, not a number 9 skill, not a target man skill, it's a football skill. And if he does not possess that, in fact, even
if he doesn't possess it, he's not going to suddenly magically possess it now.
Even at Inter, because he had, as you were saying, he had a poor first touch, and maybe he can compensate because he's running behind the striker as opposed to beating them off the shoulder. My whole thing is this: if you need to be able to do a job, because he was roughing up the defenders. He was there as a physical presence. We need that. Now knock the ball down to someone else. Do a job for 90 minutes. We're not saying
I can't. Now what?
You can't say you can't, because training suggests that you can.
So if you're the coach, you're going to say to him, you just need to try harder.
No, Ntwana, can I just say, Mourinho would throw in Fellaini when we needed a goal. Fellaini, we know that you're 6, but now we need to go and win the headers up front. We're going to play the ball long, win the headers up front.
Because he can't do that. Listen. This guy can't. He literally can't.
It's not why we signed you.
We've seen that he can't. 10 years in the Premier League.
It's not why we signed you.
Jack, he simply cannot.
I think he can, if he applied himself.
What makes you think he can? Evidence, which is on video, which tells us that he cannot.
Every football player needs to learn a skill and do a job.
Then, if you want to say that.
Except Lukaku.
He literally can't. He's never shown that he has a first touch where you can ask him to play in the tight.
So you're saying to me that Lukaku can only do one job for his team?
And at a high level, where it delivers to a point of you getting a Scudetto. And I think if you ask him to do the thing that wins us the league, then I don't have a problem with him not necessarily being able to do the other things. Yes, it's terrible. Obviously, it is terrible that, dude, why don't you have a first touch? But at the point where if I'm his coach and I realize that this is not developing, it's not going anywhere, then I need to pivot and go to plan B.
For me, there is no plan B. I mean, I would leave it at this. So, for 30, if you are 30 games this season to play the way you do, and we'll feed your strengths. I don't think our Christiansen are comfortable playing well. I don't think N'Golo Kante. Sarri identified something in N'Golo Kante that is somewhat a latent ability. You know what? You can be box to box. You can play even just behind the 10 role. But we know N'Golo Kante to be a holding midfielder. In certain games, he says, get the license, do what you can. So I'm not saying Lukaku all of a sudden be the striker. You're not a classic number 9. No. I'm just saying do a job for a game. So if you can't do that, you must go back to Inter and go and do it. Because for
That's
Chelsea,
exactly what he wants.
yeah, you must do that. Because for Chelsea, when we were trying to win a league, and we're not saying this is how we're playing all the time. This is our plan B. If you can't adapt to a plan B, if you aren't adaptable, period, as a player, what use are you if you can't adapt at all?
You're the kind of use where you are a Serie A MVP and you are delivering a Scudetto
in one season when everything is perfect. So